Thank you guys so much for being here today on a Thursday evening, taking time out of your busy schedule. I do want to start out the evening by acknowledging that this event is taking place on the traditional Stalo territory where we're meeting today, the traditional, unceded, and beautiful territory of the Stalo people, the people of the river. Here in Abbotsford, I would like to particularly acknowledge the Sumas, Matsqui, and Kwantlen First Nations, our closest neighbors as well. So thank you for allowing us to use this land. My name is Nav Baines. I'm the chair of the UFV Alumni Association. I was a student here not too long ago. I graduated in 2013 from the School of Business. Some of my professors are in this room today. As I mentioned, part of the UFV Alumni Association. I also want to say thank you again for everyone taking the time to be here today. I also want to say thank you, for starters, to our panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedule. And it didn't just happen a week ago where we planned. This has been in the making for some time. And I'm really appreciative of all your guys' time. So I think a round of applause for the panelists as well. There are a few people here today I do want to recognize, as well. As I mentioned, some of my previous professors here, Professor David Dobson of the School of Business, Professor Mark Breedveld, I know he was here, of the School of Business, and our moderator today, Kim Milnes of the School of Business as well. Director of Communications, David Pinton, here as well. Thank you, David. Craig Toes, our VP External, here from UFV as well. Thank you, Craig. Dr. Satwinder Baines, the Director of the South Asian Studies Institute as well, here at UFV. Anita Nielsen, our newest Executive Director of Advancement and Alumni Relations. Also, Director of UFV India in the back, Gurneet Anand. Thank you, Gurneet, for being here today. And also, previous president of UFV, Dr. Skip Bassford, here today. Thank you for being here today. I also want to just also say to our UFV Alumni Board of Directors, I see Wayne, I see Joe, I would like for you to raise your hands as well for us to recognize your guys' help. Ariel as well, and your help here today. Thank you. As I mentioned, I've said thank you a lot already. I just want to say thank you again for being here today. At the Next Generation Marketers event, how modern marketers are staying ahead of the ever-changing marketing landscape. This event in and of itself is really important to us. This event is being co-hosted with the UFV Alumni Association and the British Columbia chapter of the American Marketing Association. And you'll notice in the crowd, our panelists, that there's a variety of people here today, from students to alumni to community. We are the UFV Alumni Association, but we also recognize that we also want to be present in front of students, and also the community of the Fraser Valley, which is extremely important to us. So I'm really happy that an event of this nature can take place, because I think Darian was maybe the first person I spoke to about this event, and he was extremely ecstatic. So I'm really happy. And being in marketing, to be able to have this event out here is really wonderful. As I mentioned, this event is being co-hosted with the BCAMA, the British Columbia chapter of the American Marketing Association. I do want to introduce someone from the BCAMA to say a few words on behalf of the BCAMA. Darren Mahaffey. I'll just share a little bit about Darren before he comes up here. Darren is part of the senior executive program at the BCAMA. He's a co-chair of that program. Darren has over 20 years of experience coordinating marketing and sales effort in the highly competitive packaged goods industry for organizations such as Silver Hills Bakery, Nature Paths Food, Gillette, Tropicana, Campbell, Procter & Gamble, and Weston Bakeries. Darren currently leads the global marketing efforts at Silver Hills Bakery, the leader in bringing delicious, sprouted grain products to the bakery aisle. The company also makes Little Northern House Bakehouse line of gluten-free bakery products and 1 Degree organic cereals, granolas, and ingredient products. Darren lives in South Surrey with his wife, daughter, and his son. He's an adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia. He's an avid hockey fan, officiates minor hockey, enjoys curling, and loves a game of Trivial Pursuit. A round of applause for Darren.
So on behalf of Christian Weston, who's our president, and the rest of the board of directors, I bring you greetings and welcome to the first ever BCAMA event in the Fraser Valley. Yeah. What an amazing turnout. And I got to tell you, this group looks a lot smarter than most of the groups I see in Vancouver. Don't tell them, right? It should be Abbotsford and the Valley's little secret that we've got it over on the folks downtown. Amazing panel tonight. Thank you to all the panelists for coming out. I read about the panel and realized, sadly, that 20 years of marketing experience might be the opposite of what most companies need. Nowadays, it's the folks here who are leading the way. And I wish I could stay longer. Unfortunately, one of the things that Nav talked about is that I officiate minor hockey, and I'm going off to yell at 13 and 14-year-olds in South Surrey later tonight. The BCAMA is an amazing organization, both for sharing knowledge about marketing, as this panel will hopefully demonstrate, as well as networking with other people who have similar interests. So if you're not already and you're interested, please talk to Nav at the end of the evening so that you can understand more about what membership looks like. And if you're a senior leader, vice president, CMO, that kind of level, the senior executive program of the BCAMA that I chair is an amazing opportunity to network with others like you facing similar challenges and really have a helpful support structure as well as a learning structure within the greater Vancouver area. So thank you again, welcome, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Cheers.
Thank you, Darren. Before we get started, I just want to introduce our moderator today, Professor Kim Milnes. Kim Milnes joined UFV in 2006. She holds both a Master's of Business Administration and Bachelor of Science in Applied Mathematics from the University of British Columbia. Kim was a management consultant for almost 20 years, employed by large firms such as Accenture and TELUS, medium firms like MYRA Systems, and small startups. Her clients included a huge variety of businesses throughout BC. Kim specialized in developing and implementing e-business solutions for her clients. In her second career in academia, she combines her extensive practical business experience in areas such as e-marketing, e-business, change management, strategic management, and IT, and her passion for teaching to create a unique learning experience for both her students and herself. Thank you, Kim, for taking the time. A round of applause for Kim Milnes. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. Nav is very tall. So this event was about, new marketing, but we were just talking before, there's a lot of the stuff that we've done for 20 years that we continue to do. So we've got people here with lots of experience, we've got people in the crowd with lots of experience, and we've got brand new marketers in the audience. So I'm hoping that we're gonna do a little bit that appeals to all of you tonight. So to the panel, I have a series of questions. As an instructor, there will be an exam. No, this is an intention to be a discussion, and I really would like everybody to feel free to express your thoughts on this. I kind of seeded it with some questions of some areas that I run into as an instructor, as also that we are talking about in the field today. So let's get started. So the first question, or the first thing I want to talk about, is native advertising. Who in the crowd knows what native advertising is? Got two hands, good. That makes me good that I have an explanation. Basically, dictionary.com says native advertising is material in an online publication which resembles the publication's editorial content, but is paid for by an advertiser and intended to promote the advertiser's product. So I'm sure you've seen native advertising. It's that nice little thing that looks like it's an article but then says sponsored by next to it, okay? So it's really what's the question in the world today is native advertising blurring the lines between advertising and content? So my first question to the panel is anybody doing native advertising? And if you are, what are you doing?
So we, maybe I'll start. My name is Serge. I'm the VP of Marketing for Prospera Credit Union. So in terms of native advertising, what we do is a form of it which we call advertorials, which is a lot of storytelling that we like to do. And the reason we like it and we feel it's relevant is we're in the business of providing financial advice. And when we look at using native advertising is actually to start a discussion and talk about that piece. So it's less about selling a product as much as promoting the relationship management side that we use. And so when somebody's trying to buy a house or understand what a TFSA versus an RSP is, those are topics that, whether it's sponsored content or a real article, I think there's a connection point that can be done. And so we're finding it very useful.
Great. Sorry, and I apologize for not letting the panel introduce themselves. I'm just diving into this content because I'm so excited about it. So I apologize. So maybe as we go along, each of you could introduce yourself. So my oversight. So anybody else have any comments about native advertising?
Is this on? Yeah, all right. Hi, my name is Mo. That's the introduction. So I think, so native advertising is really interesting because I think it can be really disingenuous. And right now it's really left up to the advertiser, you would hope, to use it well or use it ethically, like what you're describing makes a lot of sense. But there is a problem with it though, because we're relying on information as if that matters, right? Because you can write an article, you can post an advertorial, you can even see on a blog or on a website, this is sponsored content. And the information's placed there. But lots of behavioral psychology will tell you that actually to your brain and your biases, that doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter that it's labeled as sponsored. That if you read it, if you're impacted by the headline, we like to think that we're rational beings and logical and we make decisions. We do not. We're animals that are driven by hormones and we react to our environment and our context. So there's a huge issue with native advertising right now, and not to like in the first topic blow it up into fake news immediately.
Oh, absolutely, go right in.
All right, let's do it. But that's really the problem, and that's the the context that we're living in, is that this stuff isn't being governed right now, and so we're left, frankly, at the whim of hopefully ethical institutions to do the right thing. But actually, there's all sorts of evidence that shows us that today, with advertorial, with native advertising, you can be shaping behaviors in really harmful ways. And it's kind of strange that there hasn't been any sort of policy change or anything to govern this, because we went through this once before 60 years ago, and I was really young back then. And it was when the first laws around false advertising came in, right? Because there was all sorts of claims being made about products and services and what have you. And back then it was decided that because those claims can shape human behavior and consumer behavior, and because we can't rely on the individual to go investigating a claim to actually see if it's true or not, let's outlaw that and make sure that our advertising claims are based in fact. And now, there's almost a parallel to the present moment, because we're allowing native advertising and all these platforms to exist without there being, frankly, any checks or any regulation in place that would require an advertiser to either have some sort of, journalistic integrity, or at least some sort of, almost like a review board to check the content to say, is this actually sincere content that's for the benefit of the consumer, or are we trying to shape behavior in perhaps a sinister way?
So, follow-up question to the panel, which is one of my other questions, which was, who do you think is responsible for moderating this? Should there be the advertiser, the publisher? Should it be the publisher, the website publisher, the owner? Should it be the advertiser themselves to be ethical? Should it be the government or another governing body?
Government.
Government.
Yeah, because market forces are what they are, and otherwise you're relying on good intentions, right? And it's a race to the bottom everywhere across marketing, and you can't rely on good intentions. So if somebody's meant to govern this, it should be government.
Okay. Anybody else doing any native advertising? Anybody thoughts on native advertising? Whether it is disingenuous? Can it be done in a way that's not disingenuous?
I'm glad that you went there, because I think we're in a very interesting. Sorry. Oh,
Introduce yourself.
sorry.
Yeah, introduce yourself. 'Cause I
Laura
didn't.
Authier, I'm Director of Marketing with UFV. And I'm glad that Mo went there because I think we're in a very interesting time where the lines are blurring between marketing and journalism in general. And journalism is facing its own kind of moment of truth right now. If anybody's been following the Covington Catholic School story, it goes to show that you need to be responsible and you need to follow an ethical code when you're engaging in any kind of communications. And so, as much as our journalistic colleagues are keen to, sometimes they dump on us marketing folks and accuse us of having faulty ethics, I think it all circles back to being strongly rooted in doing the right thing. And, I say the educational institutions that are teaching marketing also have that responsibility to make sure that ethics is a fundamental part of the curriculum.
Great, thank you. And let's make sure that I think that I want to take that pledge. Good. Any other thoughts on native advertising? All right, we can move on to the exciting one. Calculating return on investment. So exciting. But it's important in marketing, right? We have to justify the money that we spend. So my question is to each of the panel, do you calculate ROI? And if you do, what do you do to calculate your ROI? And it's okay to say no, that you don't calculate ROI.
So I have a bit of a tension with this one because as an agency, we're asked to provide ROI all the time. So every time I see the word, it's like a little bit of like PTSD kicks in. And there was an interesting point actually brought up at a BCAMA conference last year about ROI and about how it actually sets a really bad standard for what the power of marketing and what the power of communications potentially is. So quick case study. If you want to have maximal ROI for a piece of advertising, you should place it as close as possible to the point of purchase, right?
Of course.
So if you're on an e-commerce website, actually, if you were to place an ad on the checkout page, you would have like 100% ROI. The stat would be amazing, right? But it's kind of useless. And that's kind of what's going on a lot in the marketing world right now, where there's a race to the bottom to, pump up these false numbers without understanding that it's a multivariate experience and that, we are shaping human behavior. And there's not enough room for like magic and emotion in the way we're trying to shape that behavior. So I think ROI might be important, but I think it's multivariate. And there's a great stat from a marketing class that I took 20 years ago that I can't cite it properly. But there's the idea that a metric is only good until your activity becomes aligned around improving that metric, right? That if it's like a lagging indicator, it's helpful. But as soon as you start orienting yourself towards optimizing that thing, it actually defeats the very thing that you were trying to do in the first place.
Great. Darian, do you have something, or you just hold a mic?
I'm Darian with Jelly. In the 1920s or so, there's a famous marketing quote, which is, I don't know which I don't know which 50% of my marketing, 50% of my marketing isn't working. I just don't know which 50%. There, I finally got it out. But it might have been articulated better back then. But the reality is, living in 2018, I kind of countered to Mo's idea that we live in a time when attribution has never been better. Google Analytics released a new attribution model about a month ago. Joe, that'd be right? This is Joe Johnson, by the way. He's a bit of a legend.
By the way, Darian, can I get you to step back on what you mean by attribution, just so to explain
Sure.
to the...
It's like if you say, like, Alexandria introduced me to Sally over there, so she is attributed for introducing me to Sally because Alexandria knows everyone in town. So she is attributed, she would be the, so when Sally's like, well, how did Darian come into my shop and buy these cat sweaters? I'd be like, well, it's Alexandria. So she would get the attribution for sending me into the store. So Google released a new tool that lets you actually not only see where your sale comes from when someone comes online and maybe buys a cat sweater or makes a phone call or makes a donation to the UFV Alumni Association, because that's really important because it changes lives according to my pen. So don't forget. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, go UFV alum. But what the cool thing is that back in the day before this new tool came out, you would just be like, oh, they came from Facebook. Oh, they came from Google. And it was like, oh, let's give Google the attribution, or let's give the ROI to Google. But now they've made it dynamic. So you can actually watch someone come in from Facebook, and then the second time they come to the site, it's from Google. The third time they come, it's from Bing. And then, because you would have normally given that to Bing, but really you got to give it to all three. Or you could go back to the origin of who was the first person to introduce you to catsweaters.com.
Go ahead. Do you have nothing, Serge?
So we're always challenged to measure ROI in our organization. It's a common question we receive, and it's something that we look at measuring. In financial services, I'd love it to be looking at cat sweaters and kind of from one point to the next, but it's not direct consumer sales. So the way I encourage my team, or kind of what good practice is to measure ROI, is figure out what you want it to be at the beginning when you're planning and you're doing your creative brief, and you're figuring out what measures or metrics do you want to measure your ROI against. And it's not necessarily a dollar value to a sales figure. It could be sales activity. It could be an increase in traffic. So it really depends on the type of campaign you're doing. Are you trying to raise awareness, or are you actually trying to increase sales? And you can have different metrics you're looking at, and it really comes down to ensuring you know what they are, measure it, and then compare it. So you're not aiming for necessarily 2,000% ROI on what you spent, but you're continuously maturing and getting a better sense of how your money is being spent and kind of how your metrics are moving. And that's the victory out of it. It's not kind of committing to the ROI figure that you're going to get. So.
You have something?
I'm Ashley.
Ashley.
I'm the brand director at Fieldhouse. I don't currently measure our I think we at Fieldhouse measure lots of ROIs. I don't currently do any marketing ROI. I think it's a combo of things. I think we're still very young, and I have actually not a lot of experience doing that kind of thing. And then it's tough because we're a walk-in business. We have nothing online. We have no online store. We have none of those kind of things to measure. So I haven't even figured out how to do it, because it's like, who knows what that made that person walk in that day. They could have come to the concert series last summer, and now they're traveling through to the Okanagan. So every time they travel through the Okanagan, they come to Fieldhouse. And so we put a lot out there, and then it's kind of like a yearly, or we'll have other metrics that are actually not number based, but more like, how did the events go this year? Like, how many people turned up to the events, and we'll look over the whole year or something like that. And also we have wholesale, and then we have the liquor store, and then we have events. There's so many different areas, but there's one marketing effort. So we don't actually technically do ROIs on our marketing efforts, which I'm sure there's some way to do it, but we just haven't really felt the need, to put the effort into that.
Great.
So as an analytic personality, I really, really want to believe. But ROI is, you want it to be science, but it's part art and it's part religion, in that it forces you to grasp at irrational, sometimes, take items on faith. And it's, I call it the Holy Grail. I love that Darian used that quote. Craig, I don't know if you remember, but I used that quote in my interview for this job.
I use that quote in my class too.
Yeah.
And
it's one of my favorite ones, because it speaks to the fact that as marketers, we desperately want to prove that what we're doing has value. But the truth is, the university is a complex sales cycle. And we can trace and we can do attribution for part of it, but we lose the thread in so many other areas. And in order for us to create that chain of attribution, we would have to put in place so much technology and so much manpower that suddenly it loses the value. you're spending so much to track ROI that it doesn't make sense anymore. So there's a certain amount that you have to take on faith, which bugs me, but it's c'est la vie, right? So you try and get as smart as you can where you can, and track the value where you know it's there, and then do this for the rest.
Great. Well, I sort of have a slight swallow-up question, though I think maybe you've answered it, but I'm going to ask maybe a little bit more detail. Because we're in this world of big data and thousands of different things of analytics. And so rather than just say ROI that calculate, what kind of measures do you use in your marketing effort to measure what you're doing? So not necessarily ROI, but what kind of measures do you use? And do you consider yourself data-driven or experience-driven?
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Okay.
So we have a financial institute client, so we measure, we have a white paper right now that's out there, like top 10 reasons to get your kid a bank account. And so we measure how many people download the white paper, and then we give our client on a weekly basis, hey, we got 300 downloads this week. 100 of them were from a Facebook ad campaign we ran. 20 of them were from this mommy blogger who we partnered with. 30 were from an advertorial we placed in BC Living, and these ones were from like an organic search campaign. And then at an educational institute, we're recruiting for what's called adult degree completion. So you haven't finished your degree, so come here and get your degree done. So our big thing we're doing right now is we're finding Facebook lead ads to be incredible. So about 60% are Facebook lead ads, 20% are these Bing ads, because Bing, by the way, is awesome. Joe knows it. But it's like this, I know, okay, if you think about it, Bing, people who buy an internet or a PC computer, they download Internet Explorer because it's just what's on there, and they're forced to use Bing. And so no one thinks of Bing, everyone makes fun of Bing, people even who work at Microsoft make fun of Bing, but it's awesome. So, and again, if you study your analytics, you might even find out like, so even our attribution things, people somehow Bing is in there along the way. They're at work, they're bored, they're going on to their Internet Explorer. So we just measure where they come from, and then if they converted, so for adult degree completion, we measure, okay, they were an inquiry, and then thanks to Salesforce and Pardot, we can track to see if they actually converted and made a purchase. So then along the way, we study who made purchases and then try to do more marketing in the area where they made a purchase.
What do the rest of you measure? And again, Ashley can be measuring, as you said, just attendance at your events, right? What are those things that guide you as a marketer? What are those?
So we tend to work with a lot of tech companies, and our metrics wind up being pretty variable. So if it's some business-to-business software solution, it might be content downloads. If it's some direct-to-consumer, e-commerce shop, it might actually, for the ROI conversation, it might actually be how are we converting display ads into actual sales. So it winds up being a variety of things, and I feel like that actually continues to be sort of the right way of doing it, because you might be costing yourself something in the short term, even if you're maximizing ROI in some way. And the flip side of that is actually a really good example of, I think, what's going to be some pretty prolific brand growth for a company that is already pretty massive, but in the short term might not be great ROI, and that's Nike with their Colin Kaepernick campaign, right? And that was a decision for a organization to double down on a cultural moment, take a 4% hit in their shareholder value, which is something that like nobody, it's not, I mean, you're not, that's not fiduciarily, responsible for you to do that as, the CEO of an organization. But to decide to do that in the short term, because you understand that it's better to associate yourself with history, right, rather than sell a few more shoes in a quarter, is a pretty profound moment. So that's gonna, I think, lead to lift for that brand and the organization overall that you probably can't ever attribute to that particular campaign. But that's also why, thinking of ROI or metrics around that, if you always look at them as lagging indicators of looking back and saying what worked, rather than saying we need to make this number that in the future, I think it's a better way of actually understanding, where the art and religion meets the data side of things. Yeah.
Great. And again, we're going to see, and Nike has rebounded, and we'll see what happens to Gillette, right? Yeah.
Maybe just one small piece to add about that in terms of other tracking or attributes. So, like I mentioned earlier, we use a lot of advertorials or native advertising for essentially giving a chance for our investment planners or wealth specialists to share their craft or their knowledge. So when we deal with our media buyer and they kind of look at where these ads are placed, we do look at some metrics in terms of average time spent on the article. So once we actually see somebody clicking on that advertorial, we kind of look at what's the average time they spent, and that gives us an indication, is the article being read? And ultimately, in our case, because we are promoting our wealth planners and the ability to have a conversation with a qualified financial planner, it's a way for us to say the word's getting out, and it gives a brand awareness to Prospera and to the individuals that are part of that relationship. So.
One cool story coming out of Abbotsford. Any Abbotsfordians in the house? There's a run here called Run for Water. And so years ago, we took a picture of a cup of gravy, and we built a website called abbotsfordgravy.com. And so we put an ad, a full-page ad in the local paper, and then we took the equivalent of that money and did a Facebook ad campaign to people who live in Abbotsford, who are in the age demographic that we're going after, to make a donation at year-end, December, kind of the giving season. And we said, is this gravy or is this water? And then we just explained, hey, this looks like gravy to you. It's what you're going to eat this Christmas. But there's people whose water looks like this. So consider giving to help people have clean water. And so the coolest thing was that we spent the same amount of money on a print that we did on digital, and then we measured to see the donations. So interesting fact, the print, people came onto a desktop computer, and we saw about 17 large donations, like good donations. But then on the digital campaign, we saw about 90 small donations. So it was interesting to see the difference between quantity versus quality, and also kind of what people, if they're on their mobile device or their desktop. So it was a really fascinating case study when it came to donations and using print versus using digital.
Cool, great. So let's go on to another good controversial topic. Privacy and marketing. We know as marketers that we'd love to know everything about you, because if we know everything about you, we can market to you. But then we have people like our friends at Cambridge Analytica, who ended up, poor Mark Zuckerberg, in front of Congress. We have fake news that's being used to target elections. We have data breaches of massive amounts of data. So what do you do to try and create that privacy and manage that privacy of data with that marketer's drive to get more? Have I stumped you?
I think privacy is kind of becoming this like public myth that we all believe in.
Yes.
And the reason is, again, there's market forces that are driving this technology, right? So as long as we continue to live in a capitalist society, I feel like the market forces are going to continue pushing advancements in these areas, and we're kind of like, holding up an umbrella in front of a tsunami, actually. And Cambridge Analytica gets a bit of a bad rap.
Yeah,
Not
I agree.
because, and again, not because they weren't doing shitty bad stuff, but it's because, well, everybody's doing shitty bad stuff, right? I think it was the timing and the association that they had with the campaign, obviously, that turned it into a horrible cultural moment. But there's way more sinister stuff out there than Cambridge Analytica, right? Like they don't even like scratch the surface. Like Instagram, for example, right? People post images and then you get likes or responses and things like that. And we think this feedback's in real time. We think that, I posted the image, somebody liked it over there, and I saw that they liked it. And do you think that's what's happening in real time? Or do you think there's an intermediary company that trades in algorithms that over time has tracked how often you're opening the app? And based on that, they created a probabilistic model to understand how often your brain likely releases dopamine. So now, are they collecting up the likes and feeding them back to you over time to keep you hooked? Or is it real time, right? It's the latter, right? And there's companies that trade in these algorithms. Today you have companies that can do big data correlations, and it can't actually be called science, because in science you have to like prove causation, and all they can do is prove correlation. But they can actually analyze Facebook audience data and tell you which components of the audience are likely manic depressive, right? And once you've determined which segment of the audience is manic depressive, Well, what if you were to then say, now that they're in a manic period, let's market, a $5.99 getaway to Vegas for the weekend. How much would that sell for? Like this is stuff that's going on today, that exists today. And Cambridge Analytica and the fact that that kind of fell apart, and Zuckerberg in Congress, like the whole thing was just such a theatrical farce. And I feel like the sad thing is that privacy is increasingly becoming a myth, and we are so far behind this like tsunami that's already washed over us.
Which leads me to, I guess, a topic about micro-targeting, which is exactly what you just came up with. Some people think micro-targeting is like the panacea of marketing, that we finally found the exact people that want us. At the same time, micro-targeting usually means micro-messaging. As in, if you want to talk to people, you need to give them the message that speaks to them. So there's the problem of finding that small group of people, but do you have the right message? And you actually can do yourself more harm by giving the wrong message to that small group of people. So what's your thought about micro-targeting? Do you do it? Do you not do it? Do you ever want to do it? Would you love to do it if you got the data?
We don't do it.
Good answer. Good answer after the
Probably
evilness of
will never do it.
micro-targeting. Yeah.
And to be honest, probably no real interest in going at that level of granularity. Yeah.
Anybody?
There's a tool on Facebook, which is, I think, one of the most interesting, provocative tools, called Facebook lookalike audiences.
Yes.
And so what it does is that if you have more than 1,000 people that are your existing customers, you deposit them into the Facebook lookalike machine, and it's like, and it pumps out all these people on Facebook that you can now advertise to that have similar buying patterns, browsing history, interests, and other stuff. And so because of that, we are able to better market to the right people. And we made sure we hired UFV graphic design students to make sure the ads look good. And so make sure if you were hiring designers, go to the UFV graphic design program. They're amazing. And so then these ads go out there, and they are actually going to people that we never had, didn't know it even existed. But we found that there was people that had, all these people that are really into cat sweaters. But we can't always assume that they're going to always live in cold areas, because maybe they just like cat sweaters for the look of them. And so Facebook lookalike audiences does that. So it's not really like micro-targeting, but it's like it uses this super machine to find like-minded people, which is so cool. I think it's so neat. Because I'm curious, though, I was with Facebook recently. Joe and I were at this meetup. It's kind of fun. And the question poses, would you ever consider paying for Facebook? And most people that they surveyed said no. And so because of that, they need to make money somehow, and because of that, that's why there's ads everywhere. And so thus, the only reason we put ads on there is because you tell us so much information, like when you got engaged, now I can advertise wedding stuff to you, which is so cool. So, it's kind of like Tom Cruise in that movie when like they scanned his eyes and they sent ads right to him, Minority Report. It's amazing. We're living in that time. So you can either embrace it or be like my cousin, who's like a fake name on Facebook, and he's like, he's Snuffleupagus, and he's like all these weird things, but like he sometimes he shows me the ads he gets served, and it's like the weirdest stuff, because I'm like, dude, they don't know if you're a man or a woman or what, or if you're an animal. So you can choose to do that and just tell your friends, yo, if you get befriended or someone tries to friend you named like, Ashley Cool Hat Girl, that's actually me, Michael Cool Hat Guy. So that happens.
But then it's like, I'm always like, why are you on those things if you, like, if you can't put any information on there, they're just looking at what other people are doing.
Grandkid photos.
Grandkid photos. Yeah.
Like there is the largest amount of Facebook users, most active Facebook users in Canada are 60 to 80 years old. It is incredible.
Which is why all the young people in the audience are off Facebook now, because their grandma's there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I do get a lot of chain mails from my grandma.
Yeah.
On Facebook, chain mail messages. Yeah, it's true.
Tagging weird stuff?
From grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
So with all this stuff, I really think it boils down to one big thing that we all want with our brand, which is trust. And I think some of this comes back to trust. So my question is, how do you create trust with your brand? What do you do in today's world of skeptics? And I'm sure there's many of them out there about marketing. So how do you create trust?
I mean, I would say I feel like my business is a lot different from everyone else here on the panel.
Which is why you're here, so
Yeah, thanks.
tell us.
It's a lot different because we get to see the faces of the people that do business with us, and they get to see our faces. So that alone probably creates a lot more trust. But I just always have this conviction that, like, to create trust, you need to be trustworthy. Like, I think that there's so much input and clutter and noise that all of us get every day, that's why this generation is getting better at seeing, like, I think with native advertising and everything, it's like you can try and pretend, but like everyone, because they have to, is getting really good at spotting what is trustworthy and what is not trustworthy. And, like, you take a step in. That's how we do it. We take a tiny step in, and then maybe if we trust that, then we take a tiny step more. And so I think that people are starting to get really good at seeing through anything that's not trustworthy. I don't know. That's my thought.
And even though UFV is a much larger organization than Fieldhouse, we're similar in that UFV is in the people business, and there's not a lot that we can get away with that doesn't involve respecting the people around us, our students, our staff, our community. And so people place a lot of stock in that relationship, and we have to follow through. And that's how we create trust, is just in the interactions that we have every day with each other.
So sadly, it's my job then.
It is. Sorry, Kim.
Yeah, for us, we're actually very fortunate. We have a CEO, Sean Good, who I think was on the board of UFV, who is an extreme leader and promotes leadership in a very authentic way. So it kind of starts from the top from a cultural standpoint, and we truly believe in authenticity, and that's in terms of leaders, people leaders, personal leaders. And so every time you're looking at, as Laura was mentioning there, we are in a people business and we are doing interactions. So through this authentic leadership, it's how you discuss with people, how you position yourself, and through that type of environment and behavior, that's how we build our brand.
Great.
Yeah, I actually want to build on that because I think trust is going to come through authenticity and transparency. But the word itself is interesting because it still implies there being a bit of a leap, right? When you trust something, there's a bit of a leap of faith in there. And everybody in here familiar with blockchain? I'm seeing some nods. Enough. All right. So increasingly, cryptocurrencies, blockchain. The reason why this stuff is exploding isn't just because it's the next sort of fad in tech. It's responding to the cultural moment we're in, which is you can't trust anybody. So blockchain inherently is a trustless technology. It doesn't require you to have faith in the system. It doesn't require you to have faith in anybody you're interacting with. It's open, transparent ledgers. Everybody's got the receipts. So today you have brands like Louis Vuitton, for example. They're working with one of our clients to create these types of labels that are going to be sort of embedded in their products, right? Because there's a lot of counterfeiting going on. And so these labels are going to be unique to every single product and impossible to replicate, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea is that you'll be able to pick up a product off the shelf, scan it, and see the full sort of supply chain, transfer of custody of this product and how it got to you. And that was their way of basically saying, we can't just say trust us because markets are being filled with products that we don't even trust. So what we can do is offer radical levels of transparency, right? And that's on the product side. Beyond that, and this kind of goes back to the previous point as well around micro-targeting, why I'm not a fan and why we don't do a lot of it is it's really hard, right? It's a lot of work, and we're lazy marketers. So we would rather do the non-programmatic stuff because everything that's micro-targeting, it kind of speaks to this whole programmatic AI-driven world, which is a race to the bottom, right? And it completely commoditizes your product, your service, whatever your offering is. And so we're interested in brand, right? Because when you have a brand story that's authentic and transparent and real and has some magic to it, you can put yourself up for sale on Amazon without being afraid that Amazon's going to replicate your business model and then sort of undercut you till you're out of business.
There's a documentary came out on Netflix recently called The Fire Festival. Anyone heard of what happened with the Fire Festival? Who's saying? So he's probably the biggest personification of the destruction of trust when it comes to influencers and Instagram. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it, it's very important, especially if you do anything with marketing or Instagramming. So what they did was essentially they paid a bunch of Instagram models to promote a festival that was actually a facade. It was not a real festival, and so it blew up in everyone's faces, and so everyone got sued down in the States. So, the American, kind of accountability board began to kind of get movements, and so in Canada, thankfully, the Canadian ad standards stepped in, and so now in Canada, if you're an influencer or a publication, magazine, you actually by law have to have sponsored content. And you have to put ad on your influencer. And so people call each other out, like there's some peer reviews, and then thankfully our Canadian ad standards is calling people out on stuff. So we're attempting to do this right now in this day and age. So Canada-wide Media, who owns BC Business and BC Living, they're trying to do the best they can. But the reality is that if you have the money to pay to put an article in BC Business, or if you just happen to be a really good writer, anyone can get anything in BC Business today. You can either pay for it or you can write it. But even if you do pay for it, they do have editors that vet it and make sure it's not like crazy. Like, hey, Tom Simpson in Abbotsford is the coolest man in the world. Like, that's your article. And it's like, I have a cow that has 20 legs. Like, they can't just put anything in there. But the reality of trust is that now that all the stuff's happened with Instagram and the Fire Festival and the fact that there's sponsored content everywhere, I think we just live in very skeptical times. And people that are just saying they want to see raw videos, they want to see raw posts. And so there's a software out of Vancouver called StoryTap. If you get a chance to check it out, storytap.com, where they actually send this software to people's phones to do really highly produced selfie videos that people can just do on their phones. And it's been this amazing technology that's been able to break through a lot of the clutter and create these authentic kind of trust building videos. So a lot of alumni associations have been using it, charities have been using it as a way just to reach out and to get testimonial videos from all over the world. It's pretty cool.
Well, Mo, go ahead.
I got a bit of a follow-up, and I actually want to just take a bit of a liberty here and make a bit of a prediction.
Absolutely.
Because the history of trust has been interesting, right? Because there was a time not too long ago where people trusted each other. So if your neighbor told you something, you trusted them. And you believe, what they said, and unless they give you some reason not to. Then the printing press was invented, right? And for the early part of that, technology's history, it wasn't actually trusted, right? Because the printing press would mass produce written content, and people would receive it and not know what to do with it, because it was like, where did this come from? This thing I'm holding in my hand, why should I believe in this thing? And as it became increasingly ubiquitous, then it was like, okay, we actually only trust the printed word, because somebody had to invest, somebody had to spend the time crafting this. So now we don't trust people, we trust the printed word. Until that became so abundant, it's like we don't trust the printed word now. And then it was like sort of back to people, kind of back to social media, because it was like personalities, individuals, influencers, and they've broken our trust, right? So that's the moment we're in right now. And the prediction is that the next thing and the next iteration of this is actually gonna be AI. And the next thing that people put their belief in is going to be that magic voodoo technology that is able to take the entire contents of human civilization and spit out an answer. You don't know how it got to it, but if it's right often enough, we're going to get to a point where people, for key decisions, will trust AI over anything else.
So Ask Jeeves is coming back?
Yeah.
Please, that'd be awesome. Who runs Ask Jeeves now? Does that still...
I don't even know.
Can someone look that up? AskJeeves.com?
Yeah, does Ask Jeeves still exist?
Because that was awesome. He was
It
like
was. It was like the
this
beginning.
butler.
It was like it was like the beginning before Google.
Oh man, where did Jeeves go?
Jeeves is gone.
He's retired with
And
Mr. Belvedere.
He was a great little butler.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of the next generation and the generation who trusts no one, there's a lot of millennials and Gen Zs in the world here in this room. Sorry, there's Gen Xers too. Sorry, we are not talking to you right now, though you have all the money. How do you market to that skeptical generation? How do you reach them? Because I teach an audience of millennials and Gen Zs every day, and they don't have network television. They are skeptical of every ad that they ever receive. They don't even know that there's a billboard out on the highway there. They don't really, I tell them, they go, there is? They don't see this. So how do you reach them? What do you do to reach them, to tell them about your brand?
I don't know if you heard, but the cannabis got legalized in Canada recently. This is crazy news. So we worked with Health Canada because we wanted to, I don't know if you know this though, but if you're underage, any 18 or younger, you're not legally allowed to smoke marijuana. It's also not good for your brain. So we needed to educate parents and kids about it. So parents was an easy one. We did a campaign with all these mommy bloggers across Canada and dad blogs, the few that exist, but going after parenting blogs to explain to them kind of what you can explain to your kids and what not to do and what to do. But then when it came to like reaching 12 to 18-year-olds, we found that people that just partnering, so advertorials essentially, or partnership content, or sponsored content, or influencer partnerships, we worked with Snapchatters. So we set up a program for Health Canada to sponsor all these Snapchatters to do posts. Instagram was still working for some groups. And then Twitch, which if you don't know Twitch yet, Twitch is literally a website where you watch people play video games. And so you can then sponsor people and thank them for doing such a good job playing video games. And people actually make a pretty good living doing this. So if you think of this age too, it's like there's like white collar, blue collar workers. There's this whole world of new collar workers that are these like professional YouTubers, professional video gamers. And so we just tried to find those who had reach in Canada, also French speaking in some area, Quebec, and said, hey, we want you to post about this, and that was the push in the campaign. About 3/4 of them wanted money to do it, so they made good money, and we got the word out to this group that was otherwise very, very, very difficult to reach. Because we couldn't really afford a character within Fortnite to run around being like, hey, don't smoke marijuana if you're underage. Yeah, because otherwise that's a great idea. Because like
they say, do the dance. He's got to have a dance.
Because they put like Avengers put Thanos in the game into Fortnite, which was brilliant, right? Because they wanted 13, 20-year-olds to see Avengers, and it was probably one of the best kind of native advertising advertorials in-game ads I'd ever seen. Like it was better than the toy in the McDonald's because he was a playable character in the game, and then I thought it was brilliant. So reaching those kids, you either become a character in Fortnite or I don't know, go to their worlds and go where they're hanging out and consuming stuff. Like they consume hours of YouTube videos. Like the YouTube stars are like the new celebrities. Like ask any kind of 13 to 20-year-old about like regular movie stars and they won't know them, but mention like PewDiePie or like all these other like YouTubers and they're like, oh yeah, that guy's the best. He's got like 88 million subscribers. And sure enough, their weekly viewership is more than most popular TV shows on TV today. So times have drastically changed.
Anybody else talking to Gen X? I'm Gen X. Well, I'm baby boomer, but the millennials or Gen Zs? Doing anything specific talking to them? Anything different? Do you do anything different, or do you just do more of the same?
So the whole categorization of Gen Z and millennials bugs me a bit because it forgets the fact that everybody is an individual, and you can't rely on the lazy categorization of all of a generation does this. There are certain truths that you can take in terms of habits, but you always need to recognize that you have a target audience and they have their hopes and dreams, and you need to be able to speak to those. Yes, UFV is recruiting that generation, but there's nothing kind of like the marketing principles still apply, right? You have to look at your target and look at what they want and speak to them where they are. Okay.
We were trying to reach like people who wanted to get engaged for Spence Diamonds, and we're like, how do you find those people? And then we just realized Google search. So anytime someone Google search, how do you get engaged or engagement ideas? So we built these like microsites encouraging people to like, here's a bunch of engagement ideas. By the way, check out Spence Diamonds. So it was like these like sites that way. So we did some ads to push people to it, and we earn some organic ranking as well. And so for right now, for higher ed, we built these microsites of scholarship ideas because we found every grade 11, 12 student is hungry and so thirsty for scholarships. And so we created all these like scholarship resource sites, or we found other people who made scholarship sites and put ads there. And it's been one of our biggest kind of ROIs as far as like spend to lead generation. And people that are interested in coming. They're not like the most affluent, richest kids, go on these sites, but it's great because we're like, this is awesome. They're interested in higher ed, they're taking it seriously, they're organized, they're planning, and hopefully they'll get some of those scholarships and come to this higher ed, because that's awesome. So it's been one of our most like fish in a barrel, because you're literally on that site because you're actually planning to go to higher education institute.
Yeah, for us, we also don't target millennials per se. The way we look at it in the financial services industry, every time we do a creative brief, we kind of put an age range, but we put a lot of other characteristics around it. And if you kind of look at our solutions and products, it's really about life stage. So the millennials are between 20 and 40. And how many millennials that are 20 years old are looking to buy a house? And so that's kind of how I always position it, is we look at life stages of our target segment and what type of product offering or solution are we looking to promote. And so from that perspective, that's why we never say, let's go after millennials. It just isn't kind of how we look at growing our business. That said, when you do put those characteristics, we do a lot more digital marketing or use our social media in different channels. So in some ways, if we are targeting something that is between the age of 20 and 40 and has certain dimensions that we think relates to that, we might be posting more on Instagram than we would on Facebook, as an example. Or maybe, Pinterest. Yeah. Reddit. But yeah.
I think like the reason that people separate millennials, but I agree, it's there's the fluid beginning and end of where millennials start and finish, and all the other factors around how they age. Yeah. I think that the reason that people do that is because, like they say, like millennials they're great at multitasking now. So it's like they're great at half listening to things or half seeing things or like really fast moving between things. And so catching attention and keeping attention, it's like the hardest thing. So I mean, I don't have answers, but I feel like that's why people separate them now, because it's this huge challenge that's just came up like pretty recently.
And they're digital natives, right? They live in the digital world. Yeah, Timo?
Yeah, and I think that's also what kind of creates the false separation, because to some extent, like it's become this cliche of like, oh, how do you millennials? Oh my God, how do you? And it's like, that Marshall McLuhan quote is like, so universal, right? It's beautiful. It's the medium is the message, and it's like the medium changes, and people think their message has somehow become irrelevant, but it hasn't, right? So if the medium is Fortnite, right, it's going to require a very particular message, right? And it's going to require you to go through the transformation you need to be the company that's able to actually communicate on that medium. So I think the medium's the message, and like millennials are going to come and go, and there's going to be some other new generation with like a catchy name, and it's not going to change. You'll have to see where they hang out and then figure out how to craft yourself, actually transform yourself into the company that can communicate on that level.
We should honor Douglas Copeland for a moment and give him the right to name the next generation, since he's the one who started this whole thing. Because it's basically his fault. And our famous North Vancouver neighbor who created Generation X, it's like...
And by the way, he's my age.
He's your age, yeah. There you go.
Exactly.
We'll call him the Douggies.
Yeah, and say like,
Douggies.
Doug, what is the next generation? Yeah, maybe we'll be Douggies. That'd be cool. And they all have these really nice, crisp beards, and yeah.
So I got one last question, then I'll turn it over to the audience, which Mo led me into, with the medium being the message. Every time I turn around, there's a new medium out there. Do you chase the new medium, or do you stick to where you're working? And if you chase it, what do you do? How do you chase it?
We'll always try new things. Like we'll jump on Snap or jump on different things, but we always test it. So whether it's a unique URL or a tracking code or we'll see what the response is from something. So I remember when Snap first came out and when Instagram was just, got acquired by Facebook, we were doing this campaign with Lego and giving away Lego sets through contesting. And so, again, we ran a contest on all different platforms, including Pinterest, and we did one on Reddit as well. And we tried all these platforms, and then we're like, all right, we saw the quantity of traffic that came and the quality of the traffic. And the next year when we did the similar campaign, we're like, oh, we're definitely not going to go on those platforms. But it was nice to try. But then we always end up going back to some new platforms because we're like, wow, there's a lot of great people on Bing, right? Which is, again, I mention it again because it's the forgotten platform. This guy just gave the weirdest looking face. He's like, I don't believe that. But if you think about it, like if you're reaching like a seniors audience, like 60 to 80 that have a PC computer, or people that are like white collar.
They don't know how to change their settings.
Bing is incredible for conversion for certain demographics.
This is feeling like Bing doing native advertising.
No, I know, you think. But I'm just saying, I like it because it's a great example that like there is some weird stuff that comes out. Like even there's this What's on Langley magazine, which you would like, it's the weird thing that's like there's 30,000 of them in Langley, they're in Abbotsford too. But you never think of that magazine. But we ran a campaign in it for one of our clients, and sure enough, like we saw 9 phone calls come from that, and it cost us $800 for this, piece in there. But we've spent $900 on this like LinkedIn campaign that got us 0 phone calls. So it's always like, again, we live in a time when everything is measurable, everything is accountable to the cent, which is what I love in the time we live in, because no one can get away with doing scammy stuff. No more snake oil salesmen, no more people saying like, well, we did something over there, but these days it's all trackable and measurable. So again, we love diving into new places with a tracker and with a measure in place.
So I think the short answer is yes, you do chase, but with discipline. And this is what's giving rise to agile marketing principles. So if anybody here isn't familiar with agile methodology, please look it up and learn it. Because the old world of everything from project management to campaign development was moving through giant waterfall steps. There's going to be a research phase, and then a strategy phase, and then a design phase, and then execution. And these were long chunks of time, right? There was a period during which that might take half a year. And then at the end of 6 months, you would launch your campaign and be like, let's see what happened now. And you'd spend the rest of the year trying to figure out what happened. And agile marketing is about the discipline of running the experiments that are being talked about. So if there's these different platforms and these things are coming up, you can't sort of chase them reactively, throwing all your eggs into a new basket and saying, okay, hopefully this works. But you have to develop a real experimentation mindset and bring in some of these agile marketing principles so that you can work iteratively, right? So that you can actually have the discipline to be able to run an experiment in a very controlled fashion, see what results you get, and then double down on it for the next evolution of that campaign.
All right, so I'm going to turn this over to the audience to ask some questions. Whitney's going to come up here and steal one of our mics because we want to video this, and so we need you in the audio, so you need to use a mic. So does anybody have any questions for the panel? Okay, students in my class, you get bonus points if you ask a good question.
Hi, my name is Ekjot and I'm a computer information systems student. Building on something you mentioned about paying and sponsoring through vloggers and YouTube artists, what are your thoughts on Instagram influencers? And by that I mean high school kids and university kids who have tens and thousands of followers. Do you guys use those people as your marketing agents or something similar on that?
Anybody?
Yeah, one cool thing, there's a tool that came out recently where you can actually put someone's Instagram account into a software and it tells you how many of them are fake followers, how many that they bought, because it tracks if there was a big surge or a big drop and all that stuff. So we often filter them, but yeah, we love partnering with influencers if it's the right product, if it's the right campaign. So Grimm's Meats, we did this big national campaign, partnered on Instagram. And again, we're finding more and more that more people are like, we're saying, hey, like this post and be entered to win a bunch of sausage or meat or whatever they called it. And they're like also Grimm's page. But we saw such a small amount of people liking the Grimm's page because they didn't want to noisy up their page. So we're finding if we can work with people that have blogs instead and send people to the blog to enter contests, then they use a tool called Rafflecopter and we collect email addresses. Because no matter what, if Grimm's grows the biggest Instagram, Facebook following there is, to do an organic post on there now, we're only going to reach about 2 to 4% of their followers. So it becomes a bit of a waste of time and money to reach people, because then Facebook, it's like this perpetual chicken and egg of like, grow your following, but then pay more money to reach that following. So we're trying to get Grimm's and other companies to collect email addresses, because in turn you can start sending out emails like, here's 5 new cool recipes to do with your sausage, or other things like that.
We're finding a bit more trust and authenticity with sort of a micro-influencer strategy. So the idea that if somebody, like an Instagram user, has 25 to 75,000 followers, that if we can recruit a cohort of those people, they tend to be more authentic actually than sort of mega influencers that you think are going to spike your sales or spike your engagement or something. And actually, they wind up interacting more with their audiences and get higher engagement per post or per piece of content. And so that seems to be working.
Speaking of Vancouver companies, there's shopandshout.com. If you guys get the chance to check it out, made in Vancouver as well, where they're trying to help. They're like an eHarmony for influencers and brands, but doing a really good job with it, keeping things really transparent and really accountable. So Shop and Shout has kind of been one of the forces of nature that's been helping the whole Instagram influencer model be done well.
So I'm pretty new at UFV in my role, but I don't think that we've followed an influencer strategy per se, but showcasing the student experience is a pretty important part of what we do, and kind of bringing that authentic, here's what you're going to experience when you come here as a student is pretty critical. And I know that some of our faculties have done student takeovers of social media and that kind of thing, which I think is an experiment that we should, delve into more.
Great idea.
I actually, Alexandra is here. She's our social media specialist, and so we're actually looking at experimenting with influencers. So we're not there yet, but it's kind of part of our 2019 plan, and we kind of want to dabble in it and see how it goes. Maybe we'll talk to you. Yeah.
That's right. UFV influencer right there. Is there any other questions? Yeah.
So when we're talking about ROI, I don't think it's that big of a leap to think of the actual thing, the consumer black box, because you can track anything that you put in money to, except for the fact that what's actually the consumer thinking. So in this panel of all these years of marketing, do you think your data-driven decisions have somehow honed your experiences enough to say today that you have uncovered perhaps just a little percentage of that black box? Maybe you understand it a bit more, that it's no longer a mystery as much to you.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I fully understand the question.
You put in all this money in all these campaigns and try to just get people to buy your stuff, right?
So you're talking about gut. Have we developed enough gut instinct over the years about what works?
Have you developed an insight for yourself that you can say that, hey, you know what? I understand this black box a little bit to say with expertise that maybe this is what is actually in it. That maybe if I invest in this is what will actually get me results. That's what your gut has told you now.
Well, I think sheer experience gives you that over time, and you do rely increasingly on your gut, but at the same time, you also need to stop yourself every now and again to say, wait a minute, is my gut just become old habit, or is this really working? And I think every now and again you need to step back and reevaluate and reach for data. I mean, there's never enough data to really feed the decisions, or at least for me. And but yeah, you're right. You do rely on gut after a while, mostly because sometimes there's no other way.
Yeah, maybe to add on that, I guess we don't rely on the black box by ourselves. We outsource our media buying, so we go to an agency and ask them, after we kind of give our brief and the amount of money we'll spend, and say, can you build a media plan, and with kind of some dimensions around it. And we actually look at having that conversation with them and learning their expertise in the different media channels that they can actually promote through those pieces. And so we have our gut, we have things that work, but we also actually look at our partners and people who are directly always in the space and understanding how's the best way to spend our money. So
I think, that gut instinct, this is like classic creative director, like I know what to do, right? And I think it's good as a starting point, but it doesn't actually leave room for like real innovation, because there's a type of innovation that exists beyond experience and data. There's a great story, again from a BCAMA conference event with Rory Sutherland, where he talked about a credit card company that was doing a direct mail campaign. And they were sending out a form to basically get people to sign up for credit cards. And they had established data, so they knew what their expectation was for conversions on, we do a mail campaign of this many thousand people, this many % are gonna convert. They had all the right smart people with the experience at the table. They had all the right data. They constructed the mailer. They configured the envelope in what the data and the experience told them was the most optimal way. And as happens at large organizations, there was a critical fuck up in the design department. So for whatever reason, this piece of creative passed through the chain of approvals and got mixed up with something else. So this credit card renewal thing that was part of a multi-million-dollar campaign in direct mail went out with like bunny rabbits on the envelope, inexplicably, right? Inexplicably, this letter had just rabbits all over the outside. And it completely shattered every sales record they had in history, right? And no amount of experience, no amount of data would have told them, put fucking rabbits on the envelope and it's gonna sell, right? But it did. And so that's why in the realm of agile marketing especially, you need to leave room for, yes, experience and data, but there's gotta be room for experimentation because there's a type of innovation that exists beyond this.
Thanks, Whitney. This question is sort of a two-part question, one for Ashley and for Serge as well. One, myself being a credit union guy, I'm just curious as to, there's this big influx within competition within both your industries, I understand. Breweries have just made this enormous impact, not only in the Fraser Valley, but also in the Lower Mainland, in Vancouver. So it's sort of tied together. I'm just curious as to your respective industries, how do you guys deal with competition? And is it more collaborative? Do you guys feel that, whether it's in the credit union industry, everyone has each other's back? And is it, how do you sort of cut through that noise with credit union versus bank? And then in the brewing industry, as we know, there's so many breweries out there now, and I know Fieldhouse has done an amazing job of their brand as well. But from what I understand, it's continuing to grow. So are you guys anticipating, even more competition? How are you guys challenging that, asking those questions? Whoever wants to start, yeah.
The brewing industry is amazingly collaborative. It's really cool. Our founder actually had a design and branding studio for 7 years before he stopped that to start the brewery. And they had a packaging studio, and he had lots of brewery clients. And so he said, like, these brewery clients, like, he saw how amazingly collaborative the industry was, and he was like, if I'm going to do anything after this, I'm going into the brewing industry because of how cool and collaborative, and like they work together so well. Because for us, there's definitely competition. Like we are competitors, but they're also collaborative. But for us, still, I think even though there's so many breweries, it's still, as we all raise up, we just raise about how many more people drink craft beer over Budweiser or whatever. So I think there's still that change of all of us together in like a co-marketing of changing the way people drink beer. And then also when people drink one kind of beer, craft beer, they mostly drink lots of kinds of craft beer. And so that's why you would see in like Port Moody, they have an entire strip of like brewery. And it's great because people come to that strip and they hit all the breweries. And so it's like
awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, for us, we work really hard at being really thoughtful in all the aspects and all the touch points of what we do. So we work really hard in making, like, we want it to be equal in, like, we work really hard in making a really great brand and putting on really great events, and making really good beer, and knowing that if you slip on one of those things, you'll miss it somewhere. Like, you could have really good beer that has a terrible brand and doesn't reach anybody, and you probably there's probably amazing homebrewers doing that in a garage somewhere, it's even worse to have a really amazing brand and then have really bad beer. I think that, like, is sad. So yeah, I don't know. We work really hard at keeping all of those things, like, equal.
Yeah, for the financial services space, for sure, credit unions, I would say at the core, we're community-based. We're not driven by profits. We're driven by membership. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has a vote. We don't have a share price, right? So you kind of indirectly are already based on community giving, community values. So extremely a ton of collaboration amongst the credit unions in how we approach our strategies or what we choose to invest in and different programs. And to some extent, it also is a bit of by necessity. The big banks have 85%, 90% of the market share. And so when you kind of look at that scale in what often can be viewed as a commodity industry in terms of some of the solutions, the kind of unity of the credit unions together is how we share that infrastructure, share the strategies, and kind of build forward. I also oversee the community portfolio and a lot of the sponsorships and events, and it's not uncommon for us to actually join up with other credit unions. We got a Langley Rip Fest, sponsored by Jelly Marketing, and actually Prospera, Envision, Aldergrove Credit Union, and GNF literally partnered all together to be the coalition of credit unions to, launch that event for the first year last year. Prospera. Yeah. So it's interesting because I came from a banking industry in a very global bank, and the camaraderie and the types of conversations and the type of sharing is very different and very authentic and actually very welcoming.
Wait, can you wait to get the mic? Yeah, we're gonna wait to get the mic.
Okay, that's better. So Ashley, I've been to Fieldhouse many a time. I love what you guys have done there. But strangely enough, I can't recall a lot of advertising or marketing that has been the draw to get me there. So my question for you is, what are some campaigns that have really stood out to you, and what do you think is the draw for someone in my age bracket? I'm a 23-year-old student who, wants to support local business. What type of things are you doing to get me to walk into your store?
Thorough question. Yeah. I like it. So we've actually never done paid advertising ever once. So that was just something at the beginning that I'm not saying we never will. That was just something at the beginning that we decided that was important to us, mainly because we have a very small marketing budget and we wanted to put that into community events. So we put all our marketing budget into community events. And for us, that was important. We really wanted to be a community brewery. There's many different models of brewery. Lots of breweries are production-based, and we're very community-based, so everything is focused on our tasting room, and whatever's left over gets packaged and sent out, and whatever's energy's left over gets put to that, kind of an idea. So like you said, I'm 23 years old, and I want to support local business. And I think we just tell the story of who we actually are. And when we're passionate about being a local business, we work really hard at using our kitchen is all local food. We grow our own food. Our ingredients in our beer are local. And when you put passion into doing something like that, and then you just tell that story, it attracts like-minded people. And I think that we put a lot of effort into storytelling, and we just do. I think like it's very Seth Godin-ish, but he's like, make art, like do something worth talking about. And I think that we put a lot of effort into doing things that is worth talking about, and then we talk about it, and it I don't know, it's worked so far for us. Yeah.
I'm curious, how did you find out about Fieldhouse?
I honestly don't remember. I think this sounds silly. I think it was the original artwork of the fox that drew me in. Doesn't that sound silly? But
No.
I honestly, like I think I'd driven past it a couple of times, and then after a while I was like, I love craft beer, I'm just gonna go in and see if it's okay. And then it was great. So it was just funny. Thank you for answering, by the way, because I was like, I love going there, and I can't recall any marketing or any advertising that drew me in besides, I guess, like your sign, literally at the storefront. So.
And Professor Karen, will you raise your hand? Professor Karen's in the house, everyone. She is the Dean Supreme Dumbledore of the design program here at UFV. And I just think kudos to Ashley and the team who've been stewards of a brand. And I think it speaks to, graphic design students are like, my mom was like, I wanted to be a painter when I went to university. She's like, you're not going to make a living. Don't be a painter. But like the power of someone who can design, like you got Sultan and Robert and Brad who have come to our agency, and like the things they produce, the power that's in that, and the magic and the magnetism, right? It's like the power of Magneto. Like Ashley and her team have done this with this brand and stewarded it well, and they've never watered it down. Like they got really nice wax to put on their bottles, and like everything they do with craft and care, even though the wax is really annoying, and and I cut my finger the other week on it because I was yanking on it. But I just think, yeah, does it get wax on yourself? Yeah. But Karen's producing these amazing students that are respecting the brand and the power of the brand. So kudos to UFV for doing that. And feel.
Karen's students too.
Do you really? Yeah. They're rad. Yeah.
So how about one more question? Whitney gets to pick because she's got the mic.
Okay. Good evening to the panel. So I'm a third-year marketing student, and David and Kim both. I'm a proud student of both of them. Just a quick question. So I've been working in computer sales for almost 2 years now, and the number one question that people ask me is, hey, how do I install ad blockers or ad blocking software on my computer? And I say, yeah, you can install it, but why do you want to install it? They say, I don't want to see those banner ads, those YouTube video ads. I just don't want to see any ads on my computer. Then I kind of forcefully have to install an ad blocker on their thing. So my question is to the panel, how do you think we as marketers can kind of, go against this? And how do you guys think we can tackle this notion of people downloading, or there's a surge of people downloading ad blockers every single day?
Can I see a show of hands in the audience who enjoys ads on their computers?
I'm a marketer, so I do that.
And so those of us who enjoy the ads on our computers are an extreme minority. And that's the reality. People are bombarded all the time by the likes of us with things that they haven't asked to see, and we've become very good at just shutting it out and filtering it. So you don't even need an ad blocker anymore. We've become ad blockers ourselves. So the question is, you referred to Seth Godin, and Seth Godin has this book called Purple Cow where he talks about remarkables. And Seth's principle is what you need to do is create something that is worth remarking on. Something that makes people stand up, take notice, and say, how about that?
We have a slogan on our wall that says thumb-stopping content. So it's just something we developed at Jelly, where it's like, what are we doing for our clients, like video-wise, content partnership-wise? anything like white paper wise, like why would our FI, why would that white paper be interested to download? Why should someone donate to our higher ed university? Because you have to almost think generously. How do you give them something and give them something and give them something with the hope of them joining your squad or your team? And again, causing them to stop their thumb with something weird or interesting or peculiar or absurd, or even more so, they're already following Sally McPherson. All of a sudden, she's got this like cat sweater thing on her cat, and you're like, whoa, where'd you get that? Because that wasn't an ad, but we just happened to give Sally McPherson that cat sweater because she has a lot of people in her life who have cats. So that way we've dodged the ad, and we've just partnered with that lady who's got a lot of cat friends because we sell cat sweaters.
Great. Yeah, you love
It's just the most generic thing there is.
And I think that that's really relevant, and I would think that's the number one word that we want to think about in marketing, which I hopefully have got to my students, which is relevance. So I thank you for a great relevant discussion tonight from our panel. And I'll turn it over to Nev.
So I think a huge round of applause for Kim for moderating. Thank you so much, Kim. One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the conversation today was you would have seen a variety of industries represented here today. That was extremely intentional. We understand that people in this room have a variety of different interests and needs and questions. And so today where you see a financial institution represented, a university, a brewery, and 2 agencies, that was extremely intentional. And that's, as a University Alumni Association, we're trying more to collaborate with a variety of different industries to have a variety of different topics and questions. So that was extremely intentional, and that was a really riveting conversation. So I really want to say thank you again. I think they deserve one more round of applause. I have to do this. If you guys are interested in learning more about the UFV Alumni Association and the BCAMA, and if tonight really intrigued you, I encourage you to join our newsletter list just on our website. More events like this in a variety of different settings, not just here at UFV, but outside of UFV as well. Along with the BCAMA, if you find yourself in Vancouver, they're always doing something about an event per month. So as you know, marketing is just changing the way we see things more so today than ever before. And it's a conversation that's continually changing. So I think we could have this conversation probably every year and it'd be of new topics. So a really riveting conversation. And we do have some gifts for the panelists, just for taking the time to answer questions and provide this really thoughtful insight. Not just the pens, you guys get more stuff. So, and I'll get Whitney to pass it on. Just one more round of applause for our panelists. Thank you guys.